welcome Dr. David Ainley.
Thank you. I really want to thank Ken Broad for making this happen and Richard Peterson for setting it up. You know, it's not easy to get a grant from the National Science Foundation, and it took me 3 tries back in the late 90s to get a project going investigating penguin response to so-called climate change. And so the first year that I went there for this project, lo and behold, this fishing vessel shows up in the Ross Sea in New Zealand, announces that they're about to, you know, be the first to extract fish from the Ross Sea. And at the same time, Japan just says, well, they're going to increase pretty dramatically the take of minke whales. And so, you know, I was totally blown away because these people are going to destroy my project. You know, there's been a lot said about climate change, and it's really an incredibly important issue for humans. But when it comes to the ocean, you know, for decades we've really done a number on the ocean. And the Ross Sea, as the film will explain, is the last stretch of ocean left on the Earth, or it was, that hadn't been exploited. So anyway, I was really kind of perturbed. So I started writing papers and stuff, trying to get the authorities interested, jumping up and down, waving my arms, and you know, that was sort of working, but maybe not. So then I decided I had to get some public input, and so I gave a talk in Amsterdam, and at this talk there was a person who knew another person, John Weller, who produced this book, The Last Ocean, who was a still photographer and who had just finished a several-year project in a book that had a large part in the designation of the Great Sand Dunes National Park in eastern Utah. And so this person got us together, and John and I decided we would see what we could do to get the public involved. And so we decided we needed a filmmaker. And after beating the bushes, we got Peter Young, who's the person who did this film. And Peter is no novice. He's been involved in over 100 documentary films. He's done films on, you know, Discovery Channel. One was called The Quest for the Giant Squid. And so he'd actually been to the Antarctic as what he calls a ceramic engineer, which we know as a dishwasher. But so he'd been there, and so he was really excited about going again and participating in this project. And so he and John engineered or got 2 trips on Cork Expeditions nature tour to the Ross Sea. And also, somehow I got John as part of my grant, so he spent a season with us with the penguins. So anyway, and we formed this trust called the Last Ocean Trust, and so the result was this book and the film and a campaign. This film it was released in August of 2012, just as the agency that's in charge of exploiting the Southern Ocean, called CAMLR, acronym, you'll hear about it, as they were beginning to get serious about designated marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean. So that was when it first appeared. It has played on New Zealand television. If you fly to Dubai on Emirates Airlines, you can see it there, and from your seat. It was being shown on Air New Zealand until the New Zealand government took it off, and you'll see why. But But it has been to 40 or 50 film festivals. It's won awards at least 15 of them. And in most cases, it's been awards like, at the New York Wild Film Festival, the best conservation film, at the 2014 Wild and Scenic Film Festival in Grass Valley, Spirit of Activism Award, at the Real Earth Environmental Film Festival, the best science communication film, at the Boulder Film Festival, best call to action film, and then Telluride, the Moving Mountains Award. So this, as you'll see, Peter has done a really, really, really great job on this film. And so anyway, let's have the film.
Please welcome back to the stage Dr. David Ainley. So David, you said you have some follow-up information on the film. We've actually put it up on the screen here.
All right. Well, I know this is supposedly a question and answer period. And I know your first question is, how are things going? I put together some slides here to give you an idea of what happened after August 2012 when this film came out and when CAMLR met for the first time to deliberate over these marine protected areas. Okay, so here's the Ross Sea. This is the area that this group of scientists, led by me, I guess, wanted to be protected. It's 647,000 square kilometers, or 0.6 million square kilometers. It sounds like a big number, but actually the marine protected area that the United States just, in the last week that George Bush was in office, around the Northwest Hawaiian Islands is larger than this. And a couple months ago, the Obama administration designated marine protected area around it's called the remote South Pacific marine protected area, which is even larger. So this isn't like a huge sort of request. Okay. All right, so how do we get here? So CAMLR had a bunch of meetings beginning back in 2005, and they agreed to put together a network of marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean by 2012. Okay, I think my greatest accomplishment in all this, in April of 2010, I was called to Washington. I thought I was going to be read the Riot Act by the National Science Foundation for causing a lot of trouble. But I was really blown away that the National Science Foundation and the State Department had decided that they would go to bat for the Ross Sea, as long as we scientists could make the scientific case that it was a justifiable thing to do. So that was a huge, that was really huge. I'm still disbelieving, but anyway. And then so we had a series of workshops that the National Marine Fisheries Service hosted. The National Marine Fisheries Service, or NMFS, because the Ross Sea is a high seas, it's not supposedly claimed, and it is governed by a fishery treaty, so NMFS has the responsibility under U.S. law to be negotiating these sort of things. So anyway, we had some workshops with held at NMFS offices to come up with a plan and a justification for the Ross Sea. And anyway, the Ross Sea should have been, or should be, the poster child for how science can justify a marine protected area. I mean, most marine protected areas, well, you know that film by Ken Burns about the national parks in the United States, he kept saying this is the democracy's greatest gift to mankind. Well, didn't have anything to do with democracy. It just had Roosevelt signing a bunch of paper and designating 97 national monuments because he was who he was. But here we had the scientific case, and there's like 100 years of information. This is the most intensively studied stretch of the Southern Ocean, thanks largely to the National Science Foundation, but also to some degree by Italy and also New Zealand. And so we put together this proposal based on science, and the key was that you couldn't just protect a small part of it, like around penguin colonies or something. You had to be aware of the fact that the penguins move in different parts at different times of the year, and that for a penguin anyway, just as an example, all parts were equally important. So this is what we came up with at these meetings with nymphs. And so this is showing sort of trying to ranking parts of the Ross Sea according to the ecological value. And so the idea, we thought that nymphs was going to come up with a proposal that protected the Ross Sea. So, however, 2 weeks later, the government of New Zealand paid a visit to Washington, D.C., and in the back rooms of wherever they made their case. And so, so the National Science Foundation and nymphs, their goals were to conserve the Ross Sea, prohibit fishing, make it a reference area where you could investigate climate change without a lot of extenuating circumstances, and also to promote research. Okay, so as I said, the New Zealand mafia showed up, and so this is what came out of the U.S. proposal. Those yellow dots are fishing areas. So it covered most of what we discussed in our workshops, but New Zealand said that you could not prohibit all the fishing. So there's this big slice taken out right in where the meat bucket is. But also New Zealand, out of pride, twice before, over the previous 10 years, they had proposed a marine protected around the Blaney Islands, which are those things up there. And twice they were sent to the shower because they just hadn't made the case. But they couldn't go away. So they tacked the Blaney Islands back onto this thing, which, as I'll show, was like a real fatal flaw. Okay, so then New Zealand, this was New Zealand's proposal. They used this conservation planning software where you had to first have goals. And so the main goal of New Zealand was to protect the fishing industry. So their marine protected area could not exclude any fishing. But to compensate, supposedly, they added in all these huge areas of empty ocean. To a scientist, it's an empty ocean. For the public, like Carolyn Schwalger said, well, this is the biggest marine protected area in the world. Well, most of it in their proposal protected nothing. The fishing industry was perfectly willing to give up, most of that area. And plus, New Zealand insisted that the Blaney Islands be back into this, to tack it on to this proposal. Okay, so anyway, that one didn't come out. Or maybe it will. But, okay, so Anyway, so the scientists had proposed 0.6 million square kilometers. New Zealand wanted 2.8 million square kilometers and jumped around and said this is the biggest marine protected area in the world and woo woo woo. And then this group that sort of just showed up overnight got a lot of money from like Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Waite and Edward Norton. And so they were going to protect this whole Southern Ocean. And so they added all this other stuff onto their proposal, which is upping this to 2.8 million square kilometers. And at the same time, Australia, I mean, you know, Australia and New Zealand have this great rivalry on the rugby field. But seemingly, I thought they could get together and do something together in terms of the protecting the Southern Ocean, or part of it. But no, Australia had to do their own area within what was once their claim. A huge area, 5 million square kilometers, essentially. So anyway, these huge stretches of southern just totally freaked out the non-claimant countries. You know, back before the Antarctic Treaty, there were 7 countries that had claims on Antarctica: France, Norway, Chile, Argentina, UK, New Zealand, and Australia. Okay, so those are the claimant countries. So, but since then, all these other countries have signed on, and these non-claimant countries were totally freaked out by what they deemed to be territory grabs by these countries that were wanting to designate these marine protected areas within their own claims. Okay, so short of all this is that we're kind of back to the starting line. There have been meetings since then. They've all just kind of fizzled away. I mean, if you think trying to solve the geopolitics of the Middle East is daunting, this is equal. There's just, as Denzel Miller said, these countries are there for their own interest, and really that's what it boils down to. So I'm sorry to give you sort of a depressing conclusion to all this, but in retrospect, there's some rule. If you're going to try to designate a marine protected area on the high seas, you have to go for equality and not like make this huge flag waving sort of proposal that this is going to be the biggest and best thing ever. Okay, and also, rather than proposing like taking up half the Southern Ocean all at once, you have to sort of begin somewhere with a best case and then try to get that designated and then go on from there. And then you don't go and tack on areas that you already know are going to freak out some countries. I mean, even the Blaney Islands thing, when New Zealand made the first proposal, and this is within their claim, which is supposedly set aside, they proposed that 200 nautical miles around the Blaney Islands should be protected. Well, if you know anything about the law of the sea, and you do sort of, but the law of the sea says that any country with a coastline can establish an exclusive economic zone 200 miles out from the coast. So here was New Zealand proposing 200 miles around the Blaney Islands, and that just totally blew away some of these non-claimant countries because New Zealand was exercising these statutes under the law of the sea to protect these areas that smacked really like a land grab. But anyway, so you don't add that on again without doing your homework. And then the final thing is New Zealand's claim, the boundaries to its claim were exactly the same as its previous claim. And that was just another thing that freaked out the non-claimant countries. And so that's kind of where we are. And I mean, I don't know, who knows? Maybe there can be a meeting and really a reevaluation of how to proceed. And Well, I hope so. And because I think the case is there, although the time is running out. We are seeing changes to the Ross Sea because of the fishing. We've seen the fish stock get smaller. The fish are getting smaller. So anyway, there's not a lot of time, but maybe, I don't know, maybe a miracle will happen. And so anyway, so that's the story so far. So anyway, anybody have any questions?
Yes. Asking if the film is available on DVD. Actually, yes, it is.
Yeah, you can go to the Last Ocean website and order it on iTunes.
Yeah.
Sure. I think the first task is to go to every restaurant that serves Chilean sea bass and tell them why you're not going to patronize them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I guess he's. You've got a sign-up sheet for you want to pass around, or it's. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Yes. It's about buying off the fishing industries. I don't know.
Right, I spoke with the marine protected area in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. There were 8 fishing companies that fished there that were bought out. Yeah, okay, so at least for New Zealand, as the movie pointed out, their annual net take was $20 million, which is nothing. Yeah, I'm sure that New Zealand is these companies are losing money. But in the case of New Zealand, it's just a national pride, and they're sort of marking their territory and maintaining their presence, sort of thing. And I don't know, that's a good idea.
Yes. Is there anything that's called Chilean sea bass that's okay?
Yeah, I've had my problems with Seafood Watch in the last year. Up until about a year ago, for Chilean sea bass, it was a void. And then they had I don't know, they must have had some retreat somewhere, and they're now kind of following along in the footsteps of the Marine Stewardship Council, which has been totally taken over by the fishing industry. And they feel by sort of awarding the fishing industry for doing sort of okay, then maybe they can encourage them to do better. So about a year ago, Seafood Watch changed Chilean sea bass from a void to, and I get this one, best alternative. Whatever that means. But anyway, it's very confusing to the consumer. Little does the consumer know that there's been contention over that designation. And the person who wrote up their assessment actually used to work for Moody Marine, the company that certified the Ross Sea toothfish fisheries. So it's gotten to be very, I don't know, a bummer. But they're like Fish Restaurant in Sausalito is, should talk to them. Also, there's a group called, was it Fishwise in Santa Cruz that is, I think, very, knows what they're talking about. But anyway, Seafood Watch is getting weird.
Yes, back there.
Well, when I go into a restaurant and they're serving Chilean sea bass, I inform the owner or maitre d', whoever's the highest, that I'm going to walk out, and that's why. And give them some reasons and try to explain what's going on. And some of them have actually responded positively.
Yeah, just what else? Yeah, is the website still active, lastocean.org, that's at the back of the end of the film, checking out and saying what you can do? Yes.
I take it that fishing goes on every year. Has it gone on totally unabated?
Has the fishing gone on every year unabated?
Every year since 1996. They have about 2-month window before the sea ice begins to grow again, and they have to get out of there.
Yes?
I have a couple of questions about the Marine Stewardship Council process and all that. Have they revisited that certification at all? Since the expansion of that states? And this is like a total.
Asking about the Marine Stewardship Council.
Yeah, well, they sort of won the hearts of people initially. It was actually started by the World Wildlife Fund and Unilever, which is, or was, before Walmart appeared, the largest seller of stuff. But then, and for about 10 years, they certified, I don't know, maybe like 15 fisheries, which were mainly sort of mom and pop artisanal type things. And then actually Walmart appeared, and so at that point they had to like expand, and so now they've certified maybe on the order of 50 fisheries, and some of them are a real joke. Like they certify the toothfish fishery of Australia around Heard Island, even though they use bottom trawls to catch these fish, and bottom trawls are like the worst thing. Everybody agrees, scraping the bottom of the ocean, picking up everything in these trawls, the rocks, the coral, the sponges, and the toothfish, is really like bad news. But anyway, MSC certifies it. Have no idea who got paid whom, what, but yeah, we went through the whole thing. We were the first group that had ever gotten to the point where MSC recognized that they'd messed up, and they sent the case to a so-called independent adjudicator who actually was a lawyer in Jamaica, who knew nothing about biology, but he noted that there were some inconsistencies in some of the regulations and that sort of thing, and so it was sent back to Moody Marine to be reevaluated, but all they did was change the scores around and different things, and so it still passed, and that's the closest anybody has ever gotten.
Oh, yes, way back there. The Chilean sea bass is the Antarctic toothfish, yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 species of toothfish. There's the Patagonian toothfish, which is found, or used to be, well, it's still a few of them left off the coast of Chile and Argentina, South Georgia, Heard Island, the Kerguelen Islands. So that's the Patagonian toothfish. They don't have antifreeze like the Antarctic toothfish. So it's a really completely different fish with much faster physiological processes. But anyway, they're two different fish, but they're both sold as Chilean sea bass. I wouldn't say they've been fished out, but their stocks have been severely depleted. I mean, you saw in the piece about the Fulton fish market where he said that these 5 and 6 kilo fish are the most popular. Well, that's because those are the fish they're not getting, because that's the only thing left for these small fish. And actually, they aren't the quality of these big fish that are really fat. These big fish, when they get to be 100 centimeters, then they get all this fat, and then they become neutrally buoyant. But these, and so that's what makes them really valuable for cooking. But once you get down to these smaller fish that don't have the fat, you're actually might as well just be eating tilapia, in my opinion.
Yes. How long are the long lines in the Ross Sea?
Right. Well, as I said, the fish are getting smaller, and they only have 2 months to catch them all, and Camelar hasn't changed the allowable catch. It's always been, well, since 2001 has been 3,500 tons. So these days, well, they started out with long lines that are about 5 kilometers long. There's about 1,000 hooks per kilometer, and now they're up to 8 kilometers long because they have to catch a lot more smaller fish to get to the 3,500 tons. So anyway, it's changing how long the long lines are.
Yes.
Well, we're beginning to. This special killer whale that is a fish-eating species is spending much less time in any given area. They're fishing farther or in more places. We haven't really noticed a drop in numbers yet, but Adelie penguins are increasing. Their numbers are going through the roof because they've lost a competitor for these little silverfish. We can't relate it to any changing climate, and so we feel it has to be because there's just easier for these penguins because now they have a lot more fish, which are far more valuable than krill. So anyway, there are these changes that we think we're seeing.
Yes. Warming and acidification.
Well, that's a simple question with a huge answer, but there are major changes going on in the Southern Ocean, but so far they're mostly related to the ozone hole, which isn't going away because we continue to sign agreements not to use chlorofluorocarbons, but we keep doing it. Because of the ozone hole and a series of steps, the winds around Antarctica are accelerating. This leads to more sea ice in most of the Southern Ocean and to the greatest degree in the Ross Sea area. It has to do with accelerating winds are also changing the shape of the polar jet stream, just like the polar jet stream. Well, anyway, and so the polar jet stream is bowing up and bending, and so it's changing the wind patterns, and so we're getting a growing sea ice in most of Antarctica, but decreasing sea ice, which is what everybody hears about in the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. So anyway, because because of climate change, things are changing in the Southern Ocean. In terms of acidification, so far it's, at least for the Southern Ocean, it's, something in the future. The cold water absorbs a lot of CO2. In fact, a lot of it is, the Southern Ocean is saving us to some degree. But, it hasn't really changed to acidity to a noticeable extent yet.
Well, I want to thank you for your work, David, and thank you for bringing us this film tonight. Thank you. Thanks, Evan.